The chief is going to speak for a few minutes, and then City Manager Washington will speak for a few minutes, and then they'll take questions for about 5. So thanks for being here this morning.
Thanks.
Chief?
Good morning. I appreciate everyone coming. Gives me an opportunity to thank the community for the support that I've enjoyed the last 4.5 years. I also want to thank the elected and appointed officials here in Grand Rapids. This is not my first municipality, but I've never seen a level of commitment to community that I see here. The department heads work hard, elected officials work hard. We've got a city manager with a vision, so I think the future of this city is extraordinarily bright. I also want to thank the department. This is the 4th state I've worked in, and I've never worked amongst men and women more professional, more compassionate than I have here in Grand Rapids. And that goes from the civilians to the support staff, to the rank and file, right through command staff. Sometimes you don't recognize in your own backyard how fortunate and how blessed you are. But this department, I can't speak highly enough about. I also want to take a moment to just thank the people who have been so good to me, and I've been very fortunate. I started my career in Philadelphia as a transit police officer over 30 years ago. Looked up to my father, who retired as a Philadelphia police officer before moving down to take a chief's position in Florida. I've been fortunate that I've got a son who thought well enough of both myself and this profession to go into law enforcement. He's a police officer in Miami Beach. So between Philadelphia, Fort Lauderdale, Tennessee, and Grand Rapids, the last 3+ decades have been very rewarding, and all the success that we've enjoyed has truly been collaboration and collective victories. So I want people who've helped me along my way. And then I want to share just how I came to my decision. So this will be my 5th Christmas here in Grand Rapids, and I don't need to tell anybody about the importance of family. So this Christmas, I'll be heading down south knowing that I don't have to get back on a plane the following morning to get back to work. I've got a granddaughter, a son, parents, in-laws, and they're all in the Southeast. So as I get older, when I left Florida, it was in 2006, and my wife has supported my professional endeavors as I've chased opportunities, first to Tennessee and then to Michigan. So to my wife's credit, my #1 fan and biggest supporter, and it's time that I start putting geography and family a little bit ahead of professional aspirations. So my wife, she took a position as a labor and delivery nurse down in St. Petersburg. We spent a weekend down there and have already purchased a house down in Bradenton. And I'm looking forward to the next chapter of my life. So again, I want to close by thanking the people who've been so supportive of my time here in Grand Rapids. And with that, I introduce the new city manager, well, it's been 2 months already, our veteran city manager, Mr. Washington.
Well, good morning, everyone. I want to thank you for being here this morning. I also want to thank the chief for his service to our community and to the citizens here in Grand Rapids. I know that he has spent his entire career, well served, 32 years to law enforcement, and I think this is, in our conversations, has been one of the pinnacle moments of his career serving this community in Grand Rapids. The chief was modest in his remarks because he has done a lot for this community and has brought a lot of progress within our department. And I think the fact that we were one of the earlier adopters of body-worn cameras, as well as the recent accreditation that the department has achieved, as well as the progress that has been made with police and community relations, can be attributed to some of the leadership of the chief and the women and men of this department. I want to thank him publicly for the work that he has done, and respect his decision, as he has indicated, for his reasons for retirement. I know that this community is one of the safest communities in the state and in the country, particularly for communities our size. And that is at the top of my list, to ensure that as we have been safe under Chief Rahinsky's leadership, that we will continue to be one of the safest places to live, work, and play. We have very fine, talented men and women in this department that are committed to ensure the safety of our community. And we will continue to do that and ensure that that the good work that the chief has started continues as we begin to select our new top cop for this community. I will be taking this month to transition with the chief. He'll be around for some of this month, and even though that his last day is going to be the beginning of February, the chief will come back, hopefully. We have members of the community who do want to show their appreciation and celebrate with him. I was talking to some of our community business, civic, and nonprofit leaders last night, and they are beginning to plan an event for January that would allow the chief and I to work on some transitional issues. But I will also be working on searching for a consulting firm that will help us in our effort. So probably the month of December, I'll be working with staff and identifying a firm. Hopefully, our commission will be approving an agreement that staff will bring forth in January. And then the work of profiling the attributes and the competencies of our next leader in engaging community and doing that work will begin, and it will also continue as we begin to vet the candidates. And I think similar to past processes, there will be interactive opportunities for the community to meet the top finalists. It's important to get feedback not only from community, but the men and women of the department, as well as some of the colleagues that the chief works with both internally in the city as well as law enforcement throughout the county and the state as well, looking for stakeholder input. I do think that we're probably, my appreciation for the last process, it was about a 6-month process. Once the search firm was identified, and that's probably reasonable, I will be having an opportunity to meet with some of the leadership in the department. I appreciate those who are here today to talk about some interim leadership once the chief leaves. But again, I do want to thank Chief Rahinsky for the work that he's done this year. I do respect his decision to be closer to family, and I certainly wish him well in his well-deserved retirement moving forward.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now stop and see if there are any questions of me or the chief.
City Manager, is it true that you tried to convince the chief to stay?
I talked to the chief, and I certainly, let me just be clear. I did not, I want to just make sure that people understand, this is the chief's decision. And the chief and I talked, and I was somewhat surprised to hear his decision so soon. And so we did talk about whether or not he wanted to continue to remain in this organization, and it was clear that he thought it was best for him to move on at this time.
And I'll add to that. One of my disappointments in the time is I didn't get an opportunity to spend more time with Mr. Washington. I think he's got a great vision for the city. He's got the skill set and the personality to take us to the next level. But the timing was right for me. And the fact that my wife has an opportunity waiting for her, and that we now have a house waiting for us, made it difficult to say no. So, yeah, I think the future of the city is bright. There's a lot of talented people within this department, from deputy chiefs to captains, right down the rank and file. So I'm leaving in good hands.
Chief, when did you make the decision to retire?
So my wife had a couple opportunities come up in Florida for labor and delivery positions, and they never felt quite right, and they were never in the right part of the state. This one she was excited about. It was in an area geography-wise that's smack dab in the middle of our son and our in-laws and driving distance to my parents and siblings. So it was very attractive, and just intuitively I had to follow my gut, and it felt right, and I think the timing is appropriate.
Chief Rahinsky, thank you for your public service to the city, first and foremost.
Thanks.
How much did the stress of the last 2 years contribute to your decision, or maybe speed up the decision?
Yeah, I really don't think it did. I didn't come up here looking for an easy position. I came up here looking for a challenge. So I started in July of 2014, and then Ferguson was in August of 2014. And I've said before, I think that was my generation's Watts. Watts was in the summer of '65, and it changed the face of policing. And I think Ferguson changed the face of policing for a generation of law enforcement. But I think it's changed it for the better. We've become more transparent, we've become more accountable, more approachable. So no, the challenges is actually some of the things that I'll miss the most. The fact that I was surrounded by people who were capable of rising to those challenges on a daily basis, and a community that was engaged enough to want to be part of that dialogue is a rare compliment. What we have going on here is unique.
Proudest moment?
That's a great question, Heather. I guess I'm still digesting the whole, it's tough to look back. I'm still wrestling with the fact that for the first time in over 30 years, I won't have a uniform to put on. For the first time since I was 13, I won't have a job to go to. But I'm looking forward to spending time with family. And I know you can't make up time, but I've got a granddaughter who's 8 years old who still thinks it's cool to hang out with me. I want to enjoy those years before I become not so cool. So I'm looking forward to family time.
Biggest regret, anything that sticks with you or has bothered you?
Maybe just, and I think sometimes we have a tendency to dwell on the negative. This is a great police department and a great community. I think this department enjoys overwhelming support from the community, but as human nature is, you tend to hear from the outliers the most. But overwhelmingly, I recognize, as do I think the men and women who wear this uniform, just how much public support there is for this department. And I've been very fortunate to work with men and women of this caliber. I shared with them a little bit last night at roll call. Having worked in 4 states, I've never worked with people of this caliber. Their professionalism, their empathy, I'd compare them to any department in the country.
City manager, you said it'd be about, chief for 6 months there from January to hire a new chief?
Yeah, 5, and that's ballpark. So around the summer is I hope to have a conclusion to our process. So we'll try to get a search firm contract awarded beginning of January and have someone named hopefully in the summer.
Okay. Biggest qualities you're looking for?
Well, obviously, I want our chief to be someone who's concerned about keeping us safe, someone who's tough on crime, who is a visionary, who has the ability to be a good collaborator, leader, work with community, who has the capacity to lead the men and women of the department, both in terms of supporting, but also a person who's able to hold both community accountable as well as the workforce. So I think much of the same of what we've expected in Chief Rahinsky and the previous chiefs. Obviously, as the chief has mentioned, that the landscape of policing has shifted across the country, given all the conversations around police community relations, and that work will need to continue. So the good work that the chief and the department and community has done on the 21st century police community relations, those recommendations, very many of them have been implemented. There's still some work that's going to continue, and some of that's going to happen in the interim. We're not going to stop making progress while the search is going on, but certainly the chief will need to come in and pick up the baton where Chief Rahinsky is left off.
You say chief will have to come in, does that mean you are focusing your search on outside of the department?
No, I'm saying the person who comes in the position, but it will be a national search. And certainly the men and women of the department will be obviously welcome to apply, but this city deserves the best, and whether that is someone internal or external, it will be just as we've done in the past. This city is a growing community, and I said this the other day during our Commission strategic planning meeting, that we need talented people in the organization at all levels, and the police department deserves no different.
Chief, you had mentioned that you really think the department this size, for a city this size, needs more officers. How confident are you that that may in fact happen, even though you are leaving?
I'm very confident, and I think the city manager, to his credit, has already recognized and heard from both internal stakeholders and community leaders who share what they want to see in their police department, which is additional engagement, additional community interaction. And as we've pointed out before, this department at one time, going back a decade, had 100 more sworn than we do now. So you think about how many non-enforcement contacts could we have on a daily basis with 100 additional cops. We could be a greater presence in the schools, in the parks, in the residential neighborhoods, in the shopping districts. So what a difference maker that would be. So I'm confident in 12 weeks when we get a staffing and deployment study, it's going to strongly say that to get to the next level of community engagement, we're going to need additional bodies.
What would you say your proudest moment was over the last 4 years as chief?
I think it's just the collaboration. I mean, I can't point to one thing. I can point to a collection of things that this department and I and the community have achieved together. Everything from, as the city manager mentioned, being one of the first, actually I believe the first department in the state of Michigan to implement body-worn cameras, drafting a bias-free policing policy, hiring a more diverse class, coming up with a youth interaction policy. But I think if I had to just boil it down to one thing, I would say the community engagement and the accessibility. So I think if we've done anything, we've shown just how transparent we are and how approachable we are. And that's a compliment to the men and women of the department.
What's the biggest challenge still on the table for your successor?
I'd refer to the staffing and deployment study. We continue to hear from community stakeholders that they want to see additional opportunities for engagement, additional opportunities to build trust. And with our current staffing model, that's extremely difficult. We have a hard time providing the current level of service with our staffing numbers. So I think any additional opportunities are going to have to be funded by additional bodies.
What advice would you have for your replacement?
I think to recognize that the community engagement is a blessing. Sometimes it makes it feel as though you're being scrutinized to a degree that sometimes appears to create additional challenges. But what it really creates is additional opportunities. The fact that this community is not shy about sharing their voice, sharing their opinion, wanting to be a collaborator. I mean, whether it's our policing at the speed of trust and signing up people to go through a day's worth of training with police officers, or whether it was bringing together a group of community stakeholders to help us draft our bias-free policing policy, or getting people to sit with us for over 12 months while we came up with recommendations from the policing task force. There's a lot of communities where you don't find that level of commitment. So Grand Rapids is truly a unique place. So embrace that, embrace the opportunities that presents, and go from there.
All right, we're going to do two more questions. Who will be the interim chief? I'm sorry.
I have not made that determination yet. And I think when the chief announced his retirement, both deputy chiefs were not in town at the moment. Matter of fact, this is the first time I had a chance to see both of them since the announcement has been made. So I will be visiting with them, as well as some of the other leadership in the department before making that decision.
And then I just have to address something that came out yesterday. The chief made his announcement for retirement. A lot of people were shocked, including some officers internally. They actually learned about the retirement from the news.
If I could.
I think there was some kind of...
Yeah, so the challenge there in this day of social media is I wanted to make sure, and I wanted to certainly defer to the city manager as well. You're trying to inform elected officials, city commissioners, community stakeholders, command staff, and officers. And the last thing I wanted to do is for a city commissioner to get an email from someone or the mayor to see a tweet from a news station. So the city manager, to his credit, we coordinated. So I was meeting with command staff, and a short time later, word went out electronically. But obviously, in this day of instant communication, to try to align that is very difficult. And I think we did it with an eye towards being sensitive to both elected, the officers who work hard every day, and the community.
What will you miss most about Grand Rapids as you move to Florida? And certainly not the snow.
So that's an easy one. The thing that I'll miss the most will be the people. And some of them are in this room, some of them are in the community, but the people here are top notch. When they talk about Midwestern folk being just a cut above, I can't echo that sentiment. It's heartfelt. And what I'll miss the least are days where you don't see the sun days on end. It's a hardy group here in Michigan. We embrace winter from October right through March and sometimes April. So it's a hardy group here, and I give them credit.
And
This
Chief, you've
retirement-
been protecting and serving the public for many years. But what are you going to miss most about the job?
I think your question kind of answered it. The fact that I have had the ability to serve and protect, that's a unique privilege. I mean, I remember when I first started as a transit cop, stepping onto a subway car at 3 in the morning and seeing people relax just by your mere presence. And even now, when I walk into a coffee shop and someone smiles and buys you a cup of coffee. So I know it feels as though police and law enforcement in general has been under the microscope, but the support that we enjoy here in Grand Rapids, and I think to a large extent nationally, I'm going to miss that.
Is this a true retirement?
Wow. That I don't know. I know what tomorrow holds. I don't know what next year holds. But as of now, I'm looking forward to the next chapter and the next adventure. So thank you very much.